The roadside inn smelled of damp carpet and stale French fries. Soap in the shower was paper thin. There was a cigarette burn right near the pillow. One dim lamp in the corner kept buzzing. I was already in the middle of them. One behind, one in front. My back pressed against Eli's chest. Jonah's hands were on my hips. Their skin was hot, like sun-warmed steel. My body trembled. Maybe from the heat. Maybe from something deeper. The A.C. was dead. Or maybe I was. Jonah kissed me first rough, hungry. Eli's grip around my waist tightened like he was afraid I'd float away. And I didn't resist. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. I was already too far in. Only if you take turns, I told them. And they had. It didn't feel like stepping over a line. It felt like collapsing into something I'd been aching for without realizing. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't pushed. I was very, very present. I was aching. That's the part I don't know how to explain. Not to anyone. Not even myself. I'm 39. Recently divorced. Emotionally locked down. It had been over a year since anyone touched me in a way that didn't feel like sympathy. I kept telling myself I was improving. That I just needed more time. But healing gets quiet. Healing gets lonely. Then these two men looked at me like I wasn't a problem, but a storm worth chasing. Eli and Jonah. Not blood brothers, foster brothers. Close in a way that felt more than history. They'd been helping me fix up the cottage I got in the split. Long days. Dusty work boots. Sawdust in their hair. Hands covered in paint. Eli was the steadier one. The observer. Jonah cracked jokes until the room shifted. They came every day for nearly 2 weeks. And every day, they treated me like I was whole. Not abandoned. Not wounded. Just me. The motel only came up because of the rain. A thunderstorm hit the night we pulled out all the old flooring. Roads back to Timberfield flooded. Eli said there was a cheap place near the ridge we could hole up in overnight. He said it like it was no big deal. I knew it was. Still, I nodded. Still, I packed a change of clothes. Still, I climbed into Jonah's truck, heart racing like I was 17 again. There were 2 beds in the room. I only remember one. At first, it was laughter-wet socks, Jonah whining about the busted outlet. Then came the silence. Thick. Familiar. Loaded. Eli handed me a towel. His fingers brushed mine. I met his eyes for too long. Jonah, still barefoot, leaned back on one of the beds and said, "Well, this night's already strange. Might as well say what we're all thinking." I looked at him, then at Eli, and the words just came out. "Only if you take turns." The silence afterward didn't last, because Eli stepped forward, and Jonah sat up straighter. I can't tell you who touched me first, only that my hands were shaking. And they both noticed. One of them kissed the space below my jaw. The other slid my shirt up like it was sacred. I couldn't breathe. My legs parted without thought. No one spoke. Just motion. Just breath. Skin on skin. Fingers tracing ribs. The soft thud of boots hitting the floor. It wasn't violent. It wasn't sweet. It was urgent. Like the 3 of us were drowning in our own isolation and finally decided to grab onto each other. I remember Eli's chest at my back. The scratch of Jonah's voice murmuring into my neck. Their hands never pulled me apart. They held me together. When one touched, the other watched. And I let them. Because I needed to. Because I didn't remember how not to. I didn't cry. But I could have. It didn't feel like shame. It felt like being seen. Wanted so much it ached. We never touched the second bed. We didn't talk about what happened. Just limbs twisted together, soft moans in the dark, the scent of sweat thick in the air. And in that chaos, something inside me broke open. What do you do when the only people who make you feel alive again are the ones you shouldn't have let touch you? What if there are 2 of them? And what if it doesn't destroy you but rebuilds you? I don't know what this makes me. I don't know what story I'm telling, but I know that night didn't feel like regret. It felt like breathing again, and maybe that's what I can't let go of. The week after the motel, I didn't hear from either of them. Eli sent a single text. "You all right?" I looked at it for hours before swiping it away. Jonah didn't text at all. That somehow stung worse. I told myself it was a mistake, that it only happened because of the storm, or the leftover wine in my bag, or the silence that had wrapped around me for too long. But none of that was true. I had wanted them. I still did. The cottage was meant to be my reset. It sat on the edge of Willow Creek, about 25 minutes from the nearest store. Trees wrapped the property like a secret. It was old and battered, with a leaky roof and rotted porch railings. I'd used the last of my settlement money to claim it. No working plumbing at first, cracked tiles, drafty windows, but I didn't care. I wanted space. I wanted stillness. I didn't expect help. I met Eli at a supply store in town. I'd been asking questions about sealant and insulation, clearly out of my depth. He overheard, stepped in with advice that wasn't condescending, offered to lend a hand if I needed one. Jonah came 2 days later. He had a box of nails in one hand and a bag of chips in the other. They made things easier. At least, that's how it started. But kindness feels sharp when you haven't been touched in over a year, especially when it comes with rough hands and steady gazes that don't flinch when you talk about the things that broke you. My marriage hadn't exploded, it just decayed. No screaming matches. No dramatic exits. Just years of becoming invisible to each other. He stopped asking how I felt. I stopped trying to explain. We both stopped touching, and neither of us noticed until it was already too late. The final straw wasn't dramatic. It was a Wednesday morning when he walked out the door, and I didn't care if he came back. After the divorce, people said the usual things. Time will help. Focus on yourself. You're stronger than you think. But no one tells you that healing is boring. It's folding laundry while crying quietly. It's cooking for one. It's watching reruns because silence feels heavier than grief. It's going to bed untouched. Again. That next day, after the motel, I sat on my porch, coffee cold in my hand, staring into the woods, hoping for the sound of tires on gravel, hoping for anything. But nothing came. By Friday, I snapped. I drove into town, wandered the aisles of the hardware store just to feel like a person again. And there he was, Eli. In the lumber aisle. He didn't flinch, didn't smile, just said, "Hey," like it was any other day, like nothing had passed between us. "I thought we were going to finish the stairway trim this week," he said. "Thought you were done with us." "I didn't know what I wanted," I said, looking at the floor. My fingers clenched around my keys. "I didn't either," he replied, and his voice cracked on the last word. "Jonah hasn't said much. He's keeping quiet." I nodded. "Maybe we didn't ruin something," Eli said. "Maybe we uncovered something." That night, I drove home with the windows down. The wind slapped at my face. I realized I was crying not loudly, just leaking. Because for the first time in a year, someone looked at me and didn't flinch from what I had become. 2 days later, they showed up again. Both of them. Like nothing had happened. Like the motel didn't exist. Jonah had a bucket of paint. Eli had a drill. "Back to work?" Jonah asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded, but my hands trembled as I picked up a brush. We worked like nothing was different. Installed the new kitchen cabinets, fixed the hallway outlets. But every time one of them brushed past me, I flinched. Not from fear, from memory. Jonah's forearm brushed mine, and I couldn't breathe for a second. Eli's voice behind me sent shivers down my back. And then it started again. The way Eli leaned too close when adjusting the level. The way Jonah held eye contact too long when handing me a screw. We didn't speak of that night, but it was in every silence, every pause. That evening, I sat on the unfinished bedroom floor and stared at the insulation. My hands ached. My chest ached more. I knew it wasn't over. I didn't want it to be. For the next few weeks, they came every day. Eli, always first. Calm, reliable. Jonah showed up later, usually after lunch. He always had some excuse: flat tire, traffic, had to call his cousin. But I knew. He didn't want to be alone with me. Not yet. Eli stayed composed, measured. But when he passed me tools, his fingers brushed mine longer than necessary. Jonah avoided my eyes at first, until he didn't. One day, I walked into the half-finished kitchen and found him at the counter. No shirt. Paint smudged across his chest. I opened the fridge, pretending I didn't feel his stare. "You always get this quiet when something's about to blow," he said. "What do you think is building?" I asked, not turning around. He didn't answer. Just smiled, soft and sad. I walked out. But I knew. Next we tackled the bathroom. Cramped space. Just enough room for two. Eli was under the sink, installing pipes. I reached over him for the drill. He grabbed my wrist gently. Held it. "I've been trying to forget that night," he whispered. "But I can't." Neither could I. It wasn't about repeating it. It was about not being able to shake what it had opened up in me. Not just desire, but recognition. Like something hidden had been lit up from the inside. We were careful after that. No obvious touches, no stolen look. But the silence screamed. Late one night, I sat alone in the living room. The television was on mute, just flashes of light and shadow bouncing off half-finished walls. It smelled like drywall and pine dust. Paint buckets stacked in the corners. Silence thick as smoke. Then came the knock. Soft. Back door. Eli. He stepped inside, eyes scanning like he wasn't sure what version of me he'd find. "Left my tape measure," he said quietly. I nodded. Let him pass. But just as he reached the doorway again, he stopped. "Are you okay?" I paused too long. "I don't know anymore," I said. He didn't press, just nodded once, and left. Colby, he was different, kept his distance during the day. But at night, when we crossed paths accidentally, like when we both reached for the same box of nails in the truck bed, the air pulsed. "You scared of me now?" I asked, only half joking. He looked me dead in the eyes. "No," he said. "Scared of myself around you." I didn't answer. One evening, I cooked dinner. Nothing fancy: grilled chicken, corn, cold beer. I set 3 plates out on the porch. The cicadas were loud. The air was thick and slow. Colby talked about an old band he used to play in. Eli mostly listened, but their eyes kept drifting toward me, watching, calculating. Like they were both holding something in. Later, in the kitchen, Colby helped with the dishes. It was cramped, barely enough room for 2. I handed him a glass. His fingers curled over mine a second longer than necessary. Then he pulled away, too fast. "You make it hard to be good." I didn't answer, because I didn't want him to be good. Not anymore. That tension, it was everywhere. In their footsteps on the stairs. In the way they moved around me, too close to be casual, too careful to be innocent. In how my breath hitched when one of them said my name low, like a prayer they didn't mean to speak aloud. Then came the kitchen moment. I was pouring coffee. Eli was reaching for a mug overhead. We turned at the same time. Suddenly, I was pinned lightly between him and the counter, his body against mine. Not forceful, just close. Too close. I could feel his breath on my cheek. His hand brushed mine. And we just stood there, frozen, breathing. And in those 10 seconds, everything from the motel rushed back in: the heat, the helplessness, the hunger. Eli pulled away first. Not in anger, just fast, like touching me had burned him. I didn't sleep that night, because I realized something that scared me more than guilt. I wanted it again. Not the chaos of that motel bed. Not exactly. But the closeness. The weight of their hands. The feeling of being more than a list of regrets and paperwork. That night I stood at the window. Outside, their truck sat idle. Both of them in it. Heads down. Neither speaking. Just existing in the same silence I couldn't escape. The break came on a Sunday. No tools. No blueprints. Just rain hammering the roof like it had a score to settle. Colby brought a bottle of bourbon, saying he was sick of pretending we didn't all need a drink. We poured it into chipped mugs. I sat on the couch. Eli leaned back in the armchair. Colby sprawled on the floor, shoulder brushing my knee. For a while, we just sat. No one spoke. Then I did. "We can't keep circling this." Eli looked up, calm, measured. Colby didn't look at all. "Yeah," he muttered. "I know." I stood up too fast, walked into the kitchen like distance could save me. My hands hit the cold metal of the sink. I closed my eyes. Then footsteps. Not one pair, 2. They didn't speak, didn't touch me, just stood behind me, waiting, like they needed me to decide if I'd run, or turn, or crumble. I turned. Eli reached me first. His hand rose slowly, fingers brushing my cheek. Colby came in close behind. I could feel the heat of him at my back. "I can't do this halfway," I whispered. Eli's voice was steady. "We're not asking you to." Colby added, "Only if you want it." His voice broke. So did mine. "I do." The kiss was different this time. No motel sheets, no storm, just a decision clear, clean, trembling. Eli kissed me like he had all the time in the world. Soft, sure. Colby's hands found my hips like he'd been waiting a lifetime to touch me again. My shirt lifted, my breath caught. Then they switched places. Colby kissed me rough and desperate. Eli's mouth found my neck. 2 sets of hands, calloused, reverent, perfectly timed. I reached back for Colby, pulled him closer. He groaned against my shoulder. We didn't make it to a bed. We landed on the living room floor. The rug scratched my knees. The bourbon sat forgotten on the table. Eli knelt behind me. Colby lay in front, eyes locked on mine. I was between them again. But this time no one was pretending. My clothes came off slowly, one button at a time, my breath shaky, my hands unsure, but not unwilling. Colby pulled my shirt over my head. Eli's palms skimmed over my waist from behind, grounding me like gravity. Their skin was fire against mine. And I let them. I let myself want. Let myself unravel. Colby's lips trailed across my chest. Eli kissed the curve of my shoulder, his fingers stroking down my spine. Someone whispered my name. I don't remember who. Maybe both of them did. What I remember is how fully I felt seen in that moment. Not for my body, but for the ache I carried in it. We didn't move like we were rushing toward pleasure. We moved like we were trying to hold each other together. It wasn't just heat. It was something deeper. Like they were trying to keep me from falling apart, and maybe I was doing the same for them. We moved to the floor completely. My knees against the coarse rug, the bourbon bottle tipping over near the couch. None of us cared. Eli's body pressed against my back, solid and sure. Colby's hands roamed over my thighs, up my sides. They didn't fight over me. They passed me between them with care, like sharing something sacred, like worship. And I let go. I moaned into Colby's mouth. Eli's grip on my hips grew tighter as he guided my movement. The room filled with heavy breath, the creak of wood. My name spoken like a vow. My back arched, my fingers curled. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, I stopped thinking. I stopped remembering who I was before. Before the divorce. Before the months of emptiness. Before the motel. Before this. I stopped hurting. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't delicate. It was honest. It was human. We knocked over the lamp. Someone kicked over a mug. I bit my lip to stop from crying out too loud. And when I came apart, body trembling, tears close but not falling, they caught me. Held me there, safe. After, we didn't talk. Just lay tangled on the floor. Our breathing was the only sound in the room. Colby's hand brushed through my hair. Eli's rested gently over my ribs. I wasn't empty anymore. Not this time. I didn't know what any of it meant, what it would cost. But in that hour, I felt whole. Not perfect. Not healed, but seen. Known. And I don't know if I'll survive what comes next. But I would do it again. Every aching, fragile, desperate second of it. The next 3 days were a vacuum. I didn't see them. Didn't hear from them. The house fell silent again. No hammering, no footsteps on the gravel. Just wind in the trees and my thoughts clattering around the walls like echoes. I sat in the kitchen most of the time. Barefoot. Blank. Every truck that drove by made my stomach flip. Every text notification made my pulse spike. But it was never them. On day 4, Colby showed up. He didn't knock. He just stood by his truck, hands buried in his pockets, looking like something half forgotten. I saw him from the window. I opened the door, but didn't step out. He looked up. Our eyes met for one breath. Then he looked away. "I shouldn't have come," he said. I didn't answer. He turned halfway, paused, then muttered, "I haven't stopped thinking about it." Still, I said nothing. Then he got in his truck and drove off. The next morning, Eli knocked. Twice. I opened the door. He looked tired. Not ashamed. Not angry. Just worn thin. Like I felt. "I don't regret it," he said. "Not a second of it." I looked at the floor. Couldn't meet his eyes. But I don't know what to do now. I stepped aside. Let him in. He didn't move past the entryway. Didn't touch me. Didn't even sit. "We changed something," he said. "All three of us. And we can't go back." Then he left too. The days that followed blurred. I wandered through the rooms like a ghost, touching the trim they installed, running my fingers along the places where their hands had shaped something solid. And in every detail, I felt them. Their hands, their warmth, their presence. I tried to work, tried to paint, to focus. But everything I touched reminded me of them. The house had become a memory, and I wasn't sure if I belonged in it anymore. One night, desperate to feel anything real, I drove to the only gas station in town, just to stand under fluorescent lights and make small talk with strangers. I stood in line holding a granola bar I didn't want. Then I heard it. Colby's voice behind me. Low, rough. "You look tired." I turned. Slowly. He wore that same black hoodie from the motel night. His hair was damp. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "I'm not sleeping much," I said. He nodded once. "So it's not just me." We didn't say anything else. Just stood there in a gas station aisle. Two people who had touched something too deep to forget and too fragile to hold. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The shadows moved like ghosts across the walls. And I whispered into the dark, "What are we now?" But no one answered. Because I wasn't really asking them. I was asking myself. They came back on a Monday. No calls, no warning, just two trucks rolling into the driveway like nothing had changed. I was standing barefoot on the front porch, holding a mug that had gone cold hours earlier. Eli stepped out first, walked up the steps without hesitation. Colby followed, toolbox in hand, his face unreadable. Eli spoke first. "We want to finish the work if you'll let us." Colby added, "We'll keep it clean." My heart twisted at that. Clean was the last thing I wanted, but I nodded. Okay. So they came. Every day. Measuring drywall, fixing trim, sealing baseboards. We worked shoulder to shoulder, inches apart, pretending we hadn't been tangled together like breath and sweat and skin. Eli kept his distance. Colby kept quiet, but the silence screamed. I wanted to ask them, both of them, what we were, what any of it meant. But every time the words rose, they got stuck behind the lump in my throat. One night I found Colby in the living room, just standing there, staring at the wall we'd painted together hours earlier. "You okay?" I asked. He turned slowly. His eyes were rimmed red. "No," he said softly. "I feel like I ruined something that saved me." And I didn't have the words to answer him, because that's exactly how I felt too. Eli didn't say much, but when he did, it landed like a hammer. We were putting up shelves in the hallway. He held the level in one hand, eyes fixed on the bubble. Without turning, he said, "You don't have to carry it all alone, you know." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. We finished the cottage in silence, painted the last baseboard, installed the final light fixture. The dust settled, but inside me, nothing did. If anything, everything inside me had come loose. Some nights I thought about texting them, just to say I missed them. Not the night, not the chaos. Them. But I didn't, because I didn't know if I had the right anymore. I told myself I was moving on, that what happened had been a wound like any other, something to scab over, to outlast. But it didn't feel like a wound. It felt like the first time I'd been alive in years. Now, the rooms echoed again. Cold sheets. Lights left on just to make the silence feel less hollow. I tried to distract myself. Rearranged the pantry. Swept leaves off the back steps every morning even when it rained. But everything had fingerprints I couldn't wash away. Every nail. Every joint. Every line of paint, they were in all of it. The final day came without a word. I stepped out onto the porch just in time to see their trucks pulling out of the driveway. No waves, no nods. Colby didn't even look back. They drove off in opposite directions, and I stood barefoot on the porch we'd built together, my heart dangling inside my chest like it couldn't decide whether to break or not. I told myself I should be grateful. The work was done. The house was finished. But that wasn't the part I couldn't live without. 3 weeks passed, heavy with silence. No texts. No casual check-ins. No one asking if I was okay when the wind outside sounded like knocking. Just me. And the awareness that I had broken something none of us had been strong enough to hold. I made lists. Labeled drawers. Cleaned grout with a toothbrush just to feel in control. But every task pulled me further under. Every screw I tightened was one they'd touched. Every light bulb I changed cast their shadows on the walls. And one night, I snapped. I drove to the motel. The one with the flickering neon. The vending machine that ate quarters. And the scratchy sheets. I didn't go in. Just parked in the lot, headlights off, engine running. Sat there like an idiot, staring at the same doorway where everything had changed. A sign blinked above me. Vacancy. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Maybe ghosts. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe just the version of myself I'd left behind in that bed. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands, whispered, "I'm sorry." To no one in particular. Because I was. And I wasn't. Whatever it had been, whatever we were, it hadn't been a lie. It had been real. For one night. For a few. Maybe realer than anything else in my life had been. The next morning, I left town. Drove north. Stayed with a friend in a spare room full of dusty books and cool sheets. I tried to forget the way their hands had felt on my skin. The way their eyes had looked at me like I was worth the risk. But forgetting doesn't work when the wrong thing had felt like home. When I came back, the driveway was quiet. Everything in the house was just as I'd left it. Except for the porch. There was a note, folded, tucked under a stone. No envelope, no name, just messy handwriting I knew like my own. It read, "We didn't leave because we wanted to. We left because we didn't want to break you more. But if you ever really want us, you know where to find us." No signature. Didn't need one. I read it right there on the step we'd stained together. And my knees gave out. I didn't cry. Not at first. Just held the note in my lap and watched the sun crawl across the wood like it was trying to burn the truth into it. I haven't gone to them. Not yet. But I haven't thrown the note away either. It lives in the drawer beside my bed, folded between a flashlight and a receipt I can't remember why I kept. I take it out sometimes. Late at night, when the wind presses against the windows too hard, when the cabin creaks in that haunted, lonely way old houses do, when I still sleep on one side of the bed out of habit, I unfold the paper, I reread their words, and I remember. Not just the motel, or the bourbon-soaked night on the floor, not even the way their hands held me, like I was something precious. I remember how it felt to be looked at like I mattered again. Like I was something worth stepping into the fire for. I don't think what we did was right, but I don't think it was entirely wrong either. It wasn't a mistake. It was a moment. One that carved itself into my blood. One I'll carry longer than I'll carry most people's names. There are mornings I wake up and almost forget what month it is. What day. But not them. They're still in the walls of this house. In the sawdust caught in the floorboards. In the edge of the trim where Colby's hands slipped and left a barely visible groove. In the uneven shelf Eli insisted was perfectly level. Sometimes I hear a truck in the distance and think it's them, think they've come back, changed their minds. But it never is. And I don't know if they're waiting for me to make the next move, or if they've truly let go. I've picked up my phone 100 times, typed messages I never sent, touched their names in my contacts, closed the screen. Because I'm not sure if I'm brave enough to want them out loud. Because maybe I was never drowning. Maybe I was pulling them under too. Maybe they left to save me. And maybe that was love. Or something close enough to burn. Some nights, when the wind is just right, I swear I hear laughter on the air. Like memory is trying to remind me who I was in their arms. And who I could be again. I walk the rooms of this house, my house. Built with them, haunted by them. I brush my fingers along the frame of the door. Feel the rough grain. Hear the echo of Colby's laugh when I dropped a whole gallon of paint. Feel the silence that followed every look Eli gave me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I'm still here, and there's still somewhere out there, and the note is still in my drawer, unburned, unthrown. Maybe that's all the answer I have right now. Maybe someday I'll drive. Maybe I'll follow the road that leads out past the edge of town, past the old ridge, past the motel, with the broken vending machine. Maybe I'll find them. Or maybe I won't. But if you're listening to this, if you're the kind of person who has ever reached for something knowing it could tear you apart just because it made you feel alive then, maybe you already know. Some stories don't end neatly. Some choices don't come with clean lines and good intentions. Some truths are whispered in motel rooms, and forgotten kitchens and half-built houses. And some of them change you forever. Like and subscribe if this story made something in you shift. Because not every wound bleeds. Some just hum beneath the skin, waiting to be touched. Narrated by me. If you want to hear more stories like this real, raw, messy, subscribe to the channel. Your next breath of truth is just a play button away.